There is a buzz within New York Knicks that their current group of youngsters could develop into a strong team in the future. The successful drafting of Kevin Knox and Mitchell Robinson has secured a core group of young talent that includes Kristaps Porzingis, who is recovering from his ACL injury. This recovery period should see the Knicks fall into the top end of the draft, where they'll be able to nab another key talent and truly set this team up. So the excitement is justified. But I feel that the buzz isn't there for one player who truly deserves it. And that player is none other than the French Prince himself, Frank Ntilikina. I covered Frank last year and declared him one of the most underrated rookies in the league going into his first season. And I think that due to his lack of a starring role and his defense-first mentality, Ntilikina's impact and his potential has remained underrated. This video will cover Frank's future with the Knicks, the role I see him playing this year, as well as the challenges he faces and how the Knicks should look to include and build with him in mind going forward. Last season, Frank only managed to average 6 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1 steal a game in around 21 minutes. At first glance, these stats are pretty horrible for a rookie who was drafted in the top 10. But when you take a deeper dive into his actual play, you can see that Frank still oozes with potential. First things first, point guards simply take longer than most players to adjust to the NBA. The biggest adjustment for nearly all rookies in the league is adjusting to the pace of the big league. Players are simply bigger, more athletic, and more skilled in the NBA. The ball and players whiz around at a far faster pace than in Europe or in college, and rookies tend to struggle slightly to adjust. And this is exceptionally true for point guards, who have to deal with handling the ball and running the team. The passing lanes available to them are smaller. The window of time they have to pass the ball is shorter, and every single decision and action must be made faster and with even greater pace and accuracy. Adjusting to this is tough, and early turnovers and tough play at the beginning of a rookie season can get into the heads of young players and make things even tougher. At times last year, you could see Frank struggle with this, but in a strange way it was with his scoring and not his passing that he struggled. Most point guards find it easier to put their head down and score in a pick and roll or in isolation during their rookie season. Scoring is easier to achieve than breaking down a defense and threading a pass through a wall of NBA players and making the correct read. Frank actually showed he has some serious passing chops in the NBA last year. He threw some fantastic lobs to Kristaps Porzingis in the early half of the season before his ACL injury. Frank also excelled at hitting players coming off cuts and getting them the ball in rhythm. Early in the season, the Knicks would run Doug McDermott, Tim Hardaway, and Courtney Lee off of screens, and Ntilikina showed a great focus in hitting them in the correct spots for a jumper or to drive to the basket. This kind of passing is the passing I love to see from a young point guard who looks set to be surrounded by talent in the future. The Knicks will not need Ntilikina to run the entire offense, score all of the points, and make all of the passes. With Kevin Knox and Kristaps Porzingis, they'll need a point guard who is more comfortable being the third option or even fourth option of a team, and taking the responsibility of setting up the offense and getting the ball to the teammates in the right position. And this is in part why I think Frank struggled to score the ball and dominate in his rookie year. Ntilikina was used to playing as a set-up point guard, not a first or even second option in Europe. He had spent the majority of his career playing with men in the European leagues and knew his job was to set them up unless he was specifically asked to score. Last year, I don't think Jeff Hornacek ever really trusted Frank and instructed him to score the ball or take over most of the possessions. This made sense when Porzingis was still on the team, because at that point in the season, the game plan was simply get the ball to KP and let him run the offense. But after he went down, Hornacek turned to Trey Burke, Tim Hardaway, and Michael Beasley as their primary scorers and creators. Now this probably made sense from a winning perspective last year. All three of these guys could score the ball better than Frank, but they were all in their mid to late 20s and Frank was 19 years old. The back 20 games of the season last year were the perfect opportunity to throw caution to the wind, play Ntilikina 30 minutes a game, and see what he can do. Plus, the Knicks didn't even want to win last year, as they had no chance of making the playoffs after Kristaps Porzingis went down and wanted to draft as high as possible. If Hornacek had done this and told Frank that he would be guaranteed these minutes and shots for the rest of the season, I think it would have done wonders for his confidence. For the entire season, it felt like Frank was playing on thin ice. If he made one mistake on defense or offense, Jeff would essentially pull him instantaneously. This is horrible for a rookie's development when done over an entire season, and especially for a point guard. because players will simply withdraw from their natural game into a shell in order to minimize their mistakes. But rookies need to make mistakes. It allows them to learn what does and what doesn't work in the NBA, and it especially allows them to take risks and try things they would have previously avoided. I think Frank Ntilikina would have been surprised at how effective he would have been in this primary option role. He wouldn't have won games, but he would have realized that he could break down defenses and score the ball more than he thought. And this would have in turn opened up his passing game even more and set him up for his second, third, and fourth seasons in the NBA. But instead of this, we got the Trey Burke and Emmanuel Mudiay show, which while entertaining, I don't think it was the best use of these minutes for the Knicks' future. The strong play of Trey as an offensive player showed that he did in fact deserve a place in the league, but that he is still too limited a player to be a starting point guard on a contending team. Burke's game is reminiscent of a bygone era of basketball. He relies on his quickness and his fantastic handle to break down his defender for a mid-range jumper, floater, or a layup. He also showed that he could pass the ball in pick and rolls and hit open players for jump shots. But he is simply limited as a player by his height and his defensive incapability, as well as his low three-point shooting percentage. Trey Burke is a pretty bad defender, and there is simply no hiding it. If he was a full-time starting point guard, teams would simply run their point guards in pick and roll over and over again against Trey, and they'll be able to score with relatively ease. And this is a huge drawback for any team that is serious about winning. And that is why Frank has to be the point guard of the future for the Knicks. His defense as a first-year point guard is perhaps the best I have ever seen. His lateral quickness is simply insane, and his wingspan is gigantic to go along with it. These two factors combined make him a wall that is almost impossible to get around as a guard. It also gives him the ability to recover when coming around screens far faster. His long arms mean he can contest jump shots earlier or get into the passing lane between the ball handler and the big man setting the screen. In a league run predominantly on pick and rolls, these skills are so incredibly valuable. The other skill that has increased in value on defense is the ability and size to switch. Due to Frank being 6'5" and having a huge wingspan, he can effectively switch onto both shooting guards, small forwards, and can also briefly handle some small power forwards. And it isn't just the athletic skills and gifts that make Frank into an A-grade defender. He has the other two required traits, energy and basketball IQ. Frank's intensity on the defensive end is second to none, and he expends a large amount of his energy on this end of the court. This energy minimizes the amount of mistakes and lapses he makes, and also minimizes the harm that any mistakes have on the team, as he recovers better than most players. This was no more apparent than in a game against the Cavaliers, where Frank had over 5 steals and showed some serious effort when he guarded LeBron for a few possessions, and clearly got under his skin. Then we also have Frank's high basketball IQ. He is incredibly aware of who he is guarding and what needs to be done to effectively limit them. He is also fantastic at choosing when and which players he will come off and help his team out by getting into the passing lanes or doubling opposition players. Frank made some fantastic steals last season and will only get better the longer he spends in the NBA. This upcoming season, Ntilikina will be fighting with Trey Burke and Emmanuel Mudiay for the starting point guard role, and will be fighting Mudiay and Hardaway Jr. for minutes at the 2 guard. I think he should easily beat out Mudiay, who isn't as good on defense, can't shoot, and isn't a good floor general on the court. Trey Burke might be a bit tougher, but if Frank can show enough potential and patience on the court, I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting the starting nod over Burke. This would allow Burke to fulfill his future role of a scoring guard off of the bench, something which I think he is perfectly positioned to do on this Knicks team now and in the future. Because after last season, there is no doubt that he can score and pass the ball, and his defensive deficiencies will be hidden on the bench. You can bring him in to drive a second unit, and if he is hot, you can ride his scoring for a longer period of time. But Frank Ntilikina should be given the chance at some point to start on this team. His calming influence will go a long way to helping this Knicks team score and win some games. A starting lineup of Frank, Courtney Lee, Tim Hardaway Jr., Kevin Knox, and Enes Kanter is a pretty solid team that will allow the Knicks to achieve a lot of their goals for this season. Courtney Lee will be able to get the minutes he needs to bump up his trade value, Kevin Knox will be able to get the touches he needs to develop, and the Knicks can evaluate if Hardaway will ever become the secondary playmaker they so desperately want him to be. Plus, Enes Kanter is a fantastically skilled big man to run alongside Frank and help open up his game through pick and rolls. If I was David Fizdale, I would task Frank with setting the team up, getting shooters open, and trying to score on the paint himself and work on his 3-point jump shot. And the best part is this team won't win much without KP, which could actually be a blessing in disguise. It will allow the Knicks to pick around top 5 in the draft, where an array of talented wings and shooting guards wait for the worst teams in the league next season. Drafting another fantastic shooting guard or wing would be perfect for the Knicks and would set them up for a lineup of Frank, a player like Cam Reddish, Barrett or Romeo Langford, and then Kevin Knox, Porzingis and Mitchell Robinson for the future. This lineup would be packed full of scoring, shooting and defensive ability, and highlights why Frank is the perfect fit for this team going forward. His defense would lead the team on the perimeter, and with Porzingis and Robinson in the middle, they could potentially be one of the best defensive teams in the league. Additionally, this team would have enough scoring and creation that they wouldn't need Frank to be a dazzling scorer. This future Knicks team would need someone like Mike Conley in his earlier playing years. A player who knows to get the ball to Porzingis in the post and coming off screens, who knows how to lob the ball to Robinson in the pick and roll, and who can whip the ball out to a wide array of shooters. Ntilikina also projects as a decent to good 3-point shooter, which will be key for him in the Knicks. While his overall percentage struggled last year, his shooting stroke looked pure, and I'd expect him to improve it next season, just like every other part of his game. NBA fans can at times be obsessed with the Kyrie Irvings and the Steph Currys of the league. And while there is no doubt these players are fantastic, he's not the only way to play basketball at a successful point guard level. Frank's game projects to be a calming presence on the offensive end and an incredibly disruptive one on the defensive side of the ball. And this is exactly what the Knicks will need going forward. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And let me know what you think of Frank Ntilikina and the New York Knicks and their future in the comment section below.